Okay, so I don't know what kind of tools you were working with and stuff, but one of the things you'll definitely need, I'm just going to go right from pretending that you don't know anything. You're going to need a ruler of some sort. I'm just using this one because this is what's handy at the moment. I usually use chalk, but because this is going to be like a fine line, I'm going to use one of these, Singer like marking pencils or whatever. Um, it doesn't have to be like extremely sharp, but you know what I mean. Okay, so let's say this is your vest piece, like the front, and this is going to be like what the facing is going to be. What I typically do is, let's see what this measures out to. Just shy of 6 by 4. Um, so let's say we're going to do like a 5-inch pocket. I know it'll be much smaller for the chest pocket like you were talking about. Okay, so, well, actually, let's go shorter than that. So what I like to do is on either side. So, okay, I guess how to explain how I do this. You don't want to put the cut like right in the center because this part's going to be, if this is the upper part, let's say, okay, let me just mark this so that we know what we're looking at. So this is facing up. It'll be like according like that. You don't want to put the line directly in the center because this part will fall short and you'll have a very little bit of facing that's going to be on the inside of the pocket. You want something that's a little bit longer. So what I usually do is I measure this out. So let's say it's 4 inches. So let's say, let's move this to 4. Let's see. Let's say we'll do 2.5. So from the top, we'll do 2.5 inches. I'll just mark it right here. Then we'll square it off. Okay, so that's 2.5 inches down. So what we're going to do is I usually mark off a 1/2 inch on either side. So that should be roughly, well, considering this is short of 6, so that's about right. So what I do is then I try to mark out, let me grab my other ruler. And I think I remember you saying that you're going to use jean. This is going to be like for jean cloth. So that being said, because jean likes to fray, as I'm sure you've come to realize, if this was broadcloth, I would do an 1/8 inch mark above, like, let's say our center line. But because it's broadcloth, or because it's jean cloth, I'm going to mark it at a 1/4 inch. So that's a 1/4. So you're going to mark from that 1/2 inch seam allowance. You're going to march all the way over to the other side. And then what you're going to do is you're going to stitch this. So I'll do that. This probably won't stay super bright as I start moving around and doing stuff. So I just wanted to point this out real quick. So this is the stitch line. Now, typically what I do is at that point, because now you've got a straight line, instead of following this line, which is like the first one, what I do is then I go to the opposite side or the back side or the wrong side of the cloth. And then I use this as my stitching guide. So here, let me brighten it up so you can see it a little bit. So you see, okay. Now I will do the next part. Okay, since you can't really see the cloth all that much, I'm going to mark a line, which will be the beginning point on both sides and the end point. So you're going to stitch between these 2 lines. Okay, so using the footer, I usually use it as a guide to do a 1/4 inch stitch. And then you're going to follow the stitch line as your guide instead of trying to mark it out, because the pencil or the chalk, depending on what you're using, can be a little too thick for it. Okay. I do a back up just so that I can get right onto the spot where the thing starts. Okay. So I don't know if you can see that through the camera because it's a little higher than mine. So you should have roughly 2 parallel pieces showing on the wrong side. It'll show on the right side as well, but I'm going to show you the next part on the wrong side. Okay, so next what we're going to do is, I use a chisel because it's easier for me. You can use scissors or, something. I've seen some people use the seam ripper to like push through and do that, but I'm not going to do that. All right. What I usually do is to use the chisel. I use a piece of wood as a backing piece. But before you cut it, what you want to do is, again, I'm using a quilting ruler because it's a little easier for me to be able to see it. I'm going to grab my pencil. So you're going to measure out. So it comes to, this one's a little bit longer, so, or a little bit further away than a 1/4 inch. So let's say this is like 3/8 of an inch between the 2 stitching lines. So then what I usually do is I come down. So if it's a 1/4, you're going to go like an 1/8 because you don't need to do all the way through. So there's 2 styles of doing this. There's the jetted pocket, which when this is all folded out, it's going to have like a hard edge on either side, and then in theory the cloth will fold over and then it'll close in the center like that. And then what you'll do is you'll stitch this part down using a buttonhole stitch. Same on this side. After you pull everything through and such. So the type that I'm going to show you is not the jetted pocket, but I don't remember what the specific name is. It's a welted pocket of some sort. And that doesn't require having to stop, again, another 1/2 inch away on either side, which is what you would do if you're going to do the jetted pocket. Now, that's up to you if you want to do it like that, but the way that I'm doing that, especially for like a chest pocket, it seems to be more like what I'm about to show you versus like showing the jetted pocket like this one. So what I do is I try to line up all the way to the edge. Let's see if I got a hammer handy. All right, so now I've got the beginning of my cut line. Cut all the way through both sides. Remember not to cut on your chalk line. You want to cut on the inner part of like where the ruler ends. Here, I'll show you. Like you don't want to cut past here. You want to cut between, like, closer from where the ruler had started. Sorry, about to sneeze. Okay, so that's all cut out. Then what you'll do is you'll come all the way back here. I mean, you'll trim all this stuff away, but I'm not doing it for this. You'll push it all the way through. And then hopefully you've heated up your iron at this point because you're going to need it. What I do is I go all the way through, and then, sorry, this is like bouncing. Just get in a better position so it doesn't bounce while I'm doing this. And then what you'll do is, okay, I'm going to show you the way that I do it. I don't know how anyone else does it, but this is the way I do it. So what I do is I use my fingers, and then I come through, and then like I try to make, hang on one second. Okay, sorry, I had a phone call. Let's see if I can try to angle this a little better here. Okay, so what I do is, this is going to be like your seam allowance. I try, instead of like, like jetted pockets, what you'll do is you'll just move the fabric down so that it sits like your seam allowance will be like what judges the distance between stuff. For this one, I don't do that. And I'll show you why. So I come down and I leave like a tiny little bit of a welt. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can make it later. I leave a little bit of a welt, and then using my fingers, I try to almost press it out a little bit, instead of using an iron at the moment. But you will use an iron. I'm just going to show you how to do this first. So then what I do is, while I'm holding it like this, I'll take like a needle and basting thread, and I'll work it all the way across so that this looks nice and even. And then when I go to press, it's already in place. I don't have to fiddle with it with the iron in my hand. So then it'll be nice and crisp on both sides. And I will pause it right here, and then I'll come back after I press it. Okay, so this is what it looks like after pressing. Let me turn the thing so it gets brighter. Like I said, if you baste it on both sides, this will come out much cleaner. You're going to want to do it so that on either side it's nice and flat. Let's see if I can bring this up a little bit so you can see. You don't want to have this folding over like it looks on this side. And then on this side, it should fold just a little bit. And this is because I didn't baste it, so that's why it's looking a little crusty. But you'll have like a fold right here, okay, on those inner parts, on that 1/2 inch seam allowance on the inside. So typically at this point, what I do is then I'll leave the basting stitches in for most of this and then just pull them towards the end of the whole procedure. But what I'll typically do is, like, I'll put a couple tack stitches on either side so that this just stays in place. And then what I do is once I reach this point where, you see the welt, I come back and then, within, let's say about like a 1/4 inch or so, I usually use like an 1/8 inch, but you can do it less. If you're doing it by hand, try to get as close, not as close as possible, but you're going to want to see, let me see if I can bring this up. I would put the stitch like right about like where my nail is right there in my right hand, and then go like, the whole length. That way then the seam allowance on the inside of this welt doesn't move around and then distort what you just did. So once that's all done, I do the bottom, I do the top, and then because, let's see, okay, I gotta flip it over because this is the top. So now you've got this longer piece versus the shorter piece. The shorter piece will be the bottom end. This is the top. Once you have stitched that upper piece right there, what I do is I then fold it over, and it's going to want to fight with you to like go back up like this. But what you want to do is, even it out so that on either side of this bottom facing, it's nice and even. Not particularly like, for the length, but you want to have it even on either side of like where the pocket's going to be, or the bag will be rather. So then I come back and I use an iron on the wrong side. You'll also want to iron on the wrong side, when you do the first welts, because otherwise you'll get a shine. I don't know if you can see it on this, but because this is scrap, I did it on the front instead of the back. You'll get a shine, and then you'll get to see like where you did all of this ironing and where like the pocket bag ends and stuff like that. You don't want to do that. So do all your ironing from the wrong side. Then, like I said, you're going to have a stitch right here. You're going to have a stitch right here. You're going to fold this down. And then once it's nice and even on either side, then you're going to iron that part down. And then when you come back, the welt, I'm not going to do it at the moment because it's going to take more time and I got to get running, but you're going to get a nice flat area. And in most cases, and in not all cases, but in most cases, the welts will almost sit right on top of each other. And then at that point, to finish it off, what I do is I do the bag part first. So then, you do your seam allowance here, you put your bag piece, seam allowance here, bag piece, try to match it up. Bottom of the bags usually don't match up because of like, the length or whatever. That's okay. So what I do is I trim off the longer of the two pieces and then do like whatever my seam allowance, either 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch all the way around. because I did 1/2 inch on either side here, I typically do a 1/4 inch, because then that gives me a little bit of extra room, so that when I do a tack stitch here at the end and then a tack stitch here on the end, it doesn't grab into the bag itself. It just closes up the welt. But that's pretty much how you do it. If you have any other questions, let me know. I'm going to stitch this together real quick and then send it to you. So hope this helps.